Greetings, this is Matt Field, the write-in candidate for governor of the state of Utah, unaffiliated, so working to fight that power structure. And I think that's a kind of an important point. When you look at what has been happening lately, I guess at a micro level, it's very difficult for the public to even see that. Okay, do you know how many people are actually running for governor? I don't even know exactly, but the only ones that you're hearing about are kind of the main front runners in the Republican Party, which is about 3, and then you've got 1 on the Democrat side. I believe Brian King is the guy on that side. But those are probably the only people you know about, other than if you're listening to this podcast, you've received my emails or something like that. And it's largely because of the fact that there is a power structure that exists, and anyone that denies that is, frankly, doesn't have their eyes open. It's almost impossible for you to get any time whatsoever unless you are a part of one of those parties. Okay, and I've tried. I've spoken to pretty much, I've actually sent an email to every single one of the representatives in the House and the Senate of the state, and multiple members of the members of the elected federal government in our state, with actually, when I'm thinking about it, only one reply. And the only reason I got one reply was because I'd followed up with this individual a few times. They made it sound like I was going to get a reply back, but they never did. So I felt compelled to follow up again. But Republicans aren't interested in outsiders. Democrats aren't interested in outsiders. And as a result, you literally have a power structure that caters to them. Okay, they have the most money, and obviously you've got all the news outlets. They're only reporting on those people. They don't report on them because necessarily of their popularity, particularly when you first start off. The only one that probably has some eyes on him, generally speaking, are those that are already in office, which I guess when you think about it, those are the only ones that are getting the most press. But when you look at someone like Governor Cox, right, Spency Cox, he's going to be the one that's going to get the most press because he's the sitting governor. And in terms of an election, that is a bad place to be in. That's a very bad place to be in. This shouldn't be controlled by money or organizations. It should be controlled by not just ideas, but the actions that those people are going to take and that they've shown previously in their lives. And if you were to hold up the light in that respect, you begin to see many of those candidates dwindle. So I wanted to kind of jump into a couple of things here. And firstly, I just want to point out again that if we want some real change in the country, then we do have to remove that power structure. And I've talked about this before. My very first priority is to ensure liberty in the country, and that's by eliminating corruption. And that begins by removing the ability that lobbyists have to lobby the government. The only entity that can lobby the government are the citizens themselves. Shouldn't be any corporations or organizations. Okay, and then this is the lambasted, right? The LAM-TED acronym. And then we go on to A, which is accountability. We have to hold them accountable, and I have great detail on that in my book/proposal, and that's at govmat.org. Again, totally free. I'm not trying to make money on this. In fact, my intention is to remove money from this entire process, which moves on to one of the other points. But then we move on to money, where we need to have greater accountability. Again, I talk in greater depth there. B, the bracket system. The bracket system would be so beneficial for our current election system because it would force people in certain areas to confront all of their competitors. Because there's something like 8 people running for governor right now, but the only people you know about are probably 4 total. In fact, there's probably more than 8 now I'm thinking about it. There's probably like 10. But if we had a bracket system where we would break that down into certain areas, and we would go person against person until the end, instead of using this party system, then we'd be in a much better place because we'd be able to hear what everybody has to say at an equal level without being augmented inappropriately by incumbency and also by money. Because that's part of it too. A bracket system would prevent you from receiving any funds at all. Everybody would literally be completely level. where I've got a shoestring budget for my campaign. Others have millions and millions of dollars, right? And that's a huge problem. That's a huge discrepancy, particularly when a lot of that money is coming from huge organizations and multimillionaires, billionaires that are donating, $1 million or $500,000 in one go. When someone like me, I've put limits on what you can donate, a maximum of $5,000, and that's it. That period. That's all, right? Whereas, there is no limit in the state of Utah. I don't know if anybody knows that, but someone could literally come in and donate somebody $10 million, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. The state allows it. The federal government doesn't even allow that, but the state does. So you can begin to understand at least some level the amount of corruption that can take place when you don't have limits on certain things. So we went through L, A, M, B, and now we're on to T, which stands for terms. There are no terms in the state of Utah either, which again, that's another massive problem. And I go into greater depth in this in the book, and I'm not going to dive too deep there here. I've done it many times. But then we go on to eliminate parties, E, eliminate parties. And people sometimes get rubbed a little bit the wrong way. And basically it's those people that are a bit more interested in, their team. Again, it doesn't actually matter what team you belong to. It matters what you stand for. Okay, so if you're a Democrat or Republican or independent or unaffiliated or whatever, at the end of the day, what matters is what your actual value is, where your integrity lies. And that is undermined by your political party. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but all the problems we have today were caused by Republicans and Democrats. Okay, there isn't any other major party that has caused all these issues that we currently have today. And that's one of the reasons why I hail to the inspiration of George Washington, because he was one of those that said, don't do parties. Parties will usurp the power of the people to serve themselves. And what do you see today? The money coming in from the Republican Party, the money coming in from the Democrats are coming in largely from out of state, from other party members. And I mean, there's definitely people in the state that are donating as well. I'm not discounting that. But it's the same as if somebody was sending money in from Russia to Donald Trump's campaign, or someone from North Korea to Bobby Kennedy's campaign, or on and on, right? It's just as bad. They're trying to influence the laws in our state, even though they don't reside here. That's a problem. Okay, that's puppet master stuff. So from there, we eliminate the party, and then we get rid of decadence. I've mentioned this a handful of times, and it still just rubs me the wrong way. There's actually provision in Utah law that allows people to receive up to 10% of a deal, or a public deal, by the way. That is permitted. And not just that. I mean, look at the governor. He lives in a mansion, the governor's mansion. I don't know why we do this. Humanity has a problem with essentially trying to establish a king every single time that society exists. For some reason, they always want a leader, and they want a leader that looks prestigious, that looks the best, has a great look to, that sort of thing. And that's the problem we have. And when they're supposed to be in our republic, they're supposed to be just like us. But that doesn't exist, and we've created a new aristocracy where there's a political class that gleans so many different benefits that the regular class doesn't, right? If many of these politicians are speeding or whatever, it's pretty easy for them to get out of a ticket, I'm sure. There's a lot of things that go unnoticed that we don't recognize, and that needs to end. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest things. I think as soon as we're able to establish something like that, then we are in a really, really good place. When we're able to remove all those different things that do cause corruption. We're not going to be able to eliminate corruption entirely, but to a large degree, we're going to be able to handle that by implementing those. And then probably take other steps later on as we see other ways in which corruption is able to seep through. But that's the starting point. So, but another one of the things that I wanted to talk about that really kind of bothers me is the dishonesty of the media. So, here's an example of one. Deseret News. And I know this isn't a knock on the church. Okay, I'm a full-fledged member, and so I would encourage those that are in charge of these things to push, maybe clean house, maybe look at different options. Because here is an article that was put out by the Deseret News. It says Democrat Brian King outraises Governor Cox in the first few months of 2024. Now, by reading that title, the presumption is that Brian King has massive amounts of money behind him. Okay, now at the same time, there's also another caveat I'd like to put in here. We don't know entirely yet the amount of donations they receive from everybody, right? We don't know entirely, and that's a problem. And I'll go into this article a little bit deeper, because there's, again, this immediately goes to that kind of bracket system, removing the money and all that sort of thing, because there's so much influence that these individuals wield that we're unaware of. Okay, and it's always going to the party. It's always to support the party, the power structure. Okay, because that's what the media goes for. The media is constantly focused on what is going to get the most attention, what is going to get the most clicks, how is it going to bring in the money, all that sort of thing. And when is in regards to elections, this should not happen. And there are other provisions that I put in my priority number 6 that talks, number 5, that talks specifically about the news and media and how they have to make distinctions on what they're doing in their articles. So if they're writing an opinion, if they're writing an essay, or if it's promotional, all that sort of thing. So into this article, Democrat Brian King outraises Governor Spencer Cox in the first few months of 2024. Okay, so now first of all, like I say, you think that he's going to be doing amazingly well, and this is what it says. Basically, it says King currently, received nearly $171,000 in campaign contributions in January 1st to April 17th, according to pre-state convention report. Cox netted just over $155,000. But then it goes on to the article. How much did they raise overall? Okay, this is why it's so dishonest. Because again, the title makes it seem as though that King is outraising Cox. Now, I'm not voting. I mean, obviously, I'm running for governor, but I wouldn't vote for either of them anyway. Go look at what they've done and how they've done it and everything else. But how much money have King and Cox raised overall? This is the telling part, and this is why the article is so misleading. The first quarter donations bring King's election cycle total to $217,000 and Cox to $1.6 million. Okay? Now, this obviously totally and completely changes the tone of the entire article. Okay? Because that is literally, let's just do the math really fast. I think it says it later in the article. Oh, yeah, it says right there. It's 11 times more. So the media is so, it seems like the media is so far on the left, they'll do anything. That if someone's just reading headlines and not actually diving into the article, they would think that King was on top with the money. When he's not. He's 11 times that, he's 11 times behind Cox in terms of the money. But into another point here real quick is that it says right here, it says Cox to over 1.6 million. King's campaign has spent over 126,000 and has 89,000 left over. Cox has spent nearly 700,000, much of that on donations to other candidates. So we talk about the power structure. Who are the people that are actually getting into office? It's people that Cox says he's the kingmaker. He's basically saying, I've got all the money, it's coming to me, so I'm going to say, okay, you are going to be this, you are going to be that, and I'm going to provide the money that's necessary in order for you to win. This is people are upset with Donald Trump because he decided to pay his way, or in the sense, he put forth the money in order to be elected. He obviously got a ton of free, probably billions and billions of dollars of free press because he's an entertaining guy, but or controversial, whichever one it was. But this is the same sort of, this is just as bad, right? You have Donald Trump who kind of he's not bought and paid for, even though he is. There's definitely elements of, you can see there's a lot of evidence where he has taken donations and made certain people in a certain position in the government and all that sort of thing. So it's not as though that he's impervious or something. There's no holy cows here. But Cox, he's doing the exact same thing. He's receiving a bunch of money and he's donating it to his friends essentially to get them in the position they want to, or whoever is sort of dictating that. Okay, and then he still has $986,000 on hand. Now, I'm curious, though. Honestly, I personally am curious. Where on earth is that money going? I mean, where's it going? Because they said that he spent. I haven't seen anything on these guys other than periodically the articles in the news. But what are they doing to get these things put together? Are they running events? Are they doing all these different? I don't know. Honestly, I'm confused by that, where all this money is going. But you can go and look at the filings and see specifically, and I'll probably do that at a later date. But that was probably the most. That's the most telling part when it comes to elections, is that we have neglected the fact that the money is the rule of the day. The power structure exists between the Republicans, Democrats. We've known that forever, and so we have this belief that they're the only ones that are actually running. And I mean, here's another great example of it, okay? Those of you that aren't familiar, I'm just going to pull this up real fast. Okay? Larry Elder, okay? Larry Elder actually had looked into running for the President of the United States, okay? I didn't know that he'd actually done that. But he didn't really get all that much press. I mean, if you Google this, there's very, very little. The only thing that you see primarily is that he goes in and, I mean, he suspended his campaign a while ago. But the entire time, all you saw was Trump and a little bit of Bobby Kennedy, and then you've got Biden. You know, those are basically the three that you've seen for the most part. The only reason Bobby Kennedy is in there is because he basically left the Democrat Party, and has been moving forward kind of more on an independent side of things. And they're worried that he's going to take votes from Biden, which will obviously help Trump in the end. But I didn't even know Larry Elder was running until just recently. And maybe I wasn't as in tune, but the fact of the matter remains is that he probably just didn't get any press. He probably just didn't get enough press for it to actually make a difference. And so he decided to drop out. So if you really, really want change, if you actually want change, then you have to eliminate the power structure. And that exists within those two parties. They're the ones that have the control, they're the ones that have the money, and they're the only ones that are basically going to get the coverage. The only way that you're actually able to rise up from that is if you're able to move forward on a candidate that with basically third-party media, you know, kind of the silent majority. And most people don't really even think about the governorship until, you know, maybe a month or two before the election. And I can understand that. I'm thinking about it a lot now because I'm in the process. But it's a long and heavy process, and I think that the more and more that we're willing to accept these 7 different things that I've discussed, the better off we'll be. So I wanted to go on to another story here. What my third priority is to protect our children. And there are multiple things in that particular priority. And I don't have the acronym in the book / proposal. I could edit it maybe later, I probably won't, but to remember all the subpoints that exist in there, I used the acronym SPLASHPAD. S standing for we got to do a lot with schools, L standing for the P's next, right? P standing for pornography, L standing for the LGBTQ plus community, let's see, SPL, A standing for abortion. We skip SS, I'm going to healthcare, and then we hit up PAD, which is P, pedophilia, A, affirmative action, and D, the drugs. And again, please go to govmat.org and listen. You can listen or read, doesn't matter. I record it by myself. And we actually have a Spanish version as well now. And it will be read before too long, not by me on this one. I don't speak Spanish proficiently. So, but you can go and you can listen to this entire thing. You can read the whole thing. There's even a Rumble link in there that you can go check out if that's easier for you. But we have to get the message out. You know, I've started a couple businesses, and I knew it's, you know, if you've got the best idea ever, like if you have the cure to cancer, you've got a new energy source, it doesn't really matter unless you're actually able to get it out there, right? and if the power structure isn't going to quash you, right? They're not going to squash you before you even make any movement on it. And I foolishly kind of believe that, hey, I'm going to get the message out there. People are going to love it. They're going to share it with their friends and something. No, that honestly, that actually hasn't been the case. I've been surprised at how little, how slowly the support has been through this process. For some reason, I thought the message would be enough and it would get out there, but it isn't. It isn't. I base a lot of basically everything. If you want to get scriptural, you could literally go through each of my items and you could find things within the scriptures, that God has said that justify each of these points, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, if you don't know I'm actually running and there's no way for me to break through or do anything, I mean, there's newsworthy of things in there. I mean, who wants to pay taxes anymore, right? My proposal is to move from a taxation system to an endowment system, where we take the money that we have and we live off the interest of that money. That would obviously mean massive amount of cuts across the board. In order to accommodate that, we have to remove we can't accept any more federal monies and all that sort of thing. But people are unaware that this is actually an option because it's never been told them before. And we're so used to working on a big fat budget, we're unable to go beyond. I mean, the government is unable to go beyond that. But the majority of the citizens would say, yeah, I don't want to pay taxes anymore. Why do I have to pay? Property tax is probably the biggest scam ever. Well, and then along with income tax. Income tax is a joke too. Literally, the government, it's a compulsory fee that the government imposes upon you that you have little to no control to prevent, and you have little to no control to determine where that money goes. I mean, if that's not the mob, then what is it? So, but nobody knows that we could actually move from a taxation system to an endowment system and be just fine. Look at how many universities use the endowment system. Look at how many there's other nonprofit organizations that use the endowment system. Look at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They've been smart. They've leveraged their interest. At one point, they were in debt. Back in, I don't know, what was it, the early 1900s? They were actually, maybe it was late 1800s, I don't know. They were actually in debt, but they've leveraged interest, and we know at least they've got $100 billion tucked away, and that's just the stuff that was in that particular fund. They probably have $200 billion, and who knows how much they have in total assets. It's because they were smart, and they leveraged their interests, and they did what they needed to do. If the state of Utah or the federal government had done the same thing, none of us would be paying taxes. Maybe we'd pay something to get into the country, and that's part of my proposal in getting into the state. So you have made some sort of contribution, but outside that, you're good. You're good. We shouldn't have to tax you and everything you do. And we get taxed on everything. I didn't necessarily plan on talking about taxes, but taxes just drive me crazy. You get taxed on your income, you get taxed on your travel, you get taxed on your property, you get taxed on anything that you buy. I mean, everything is taxed. If you can find something that isn't taxed, I'd love to know, because in some way, shape, or form, there is probably some underlying tax that is still continuing to grab at your money. And it's wrong. It's wrong. It's 100% wrong. There's no reason that any organization should be compelling you to do something like that. If we want to live in an actual free society, we have to remove taxes. All right. So before I wrap up here, I wanted to hit up a couple extra points. I went a little long on that tax thing, but seriously, if we can move from endowment system to an endowment system, the economy would boom. It would explode. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Anyway, so I wanted to, in relation to protecting our youth, I am bothered by this story that came out. KSL, a lot of people reported on it, but it's talking about a furry, quote unquote, furry investigation at a middle school in Payson. And this actually got national attention, which is kind of surprising. And I mentioned this in my book, but there I talk about how the LGBTQ movement has moved beyond just, transgender and all that sort of thing. It's actually into trans species. And people think that's silly and they don't believe it and all that sort of thing. And if you read what the media said, then you wouldn't believe it either. But if you actually dig a little bit deeper, you'll find that this is an actual thing. You listen to the testimonies of some of these kids, and what is pretty disparaging and pretty disgusting is that the media is actually attacking these kids that are saying, hey, the furries, these kids that aren't supposed to be wearing masks, but the administration allows them to wear a mask, even though it's contrary to the school dress code. They wear these masks, and then they are basically allowed to do what they want. The kids say they get scratched, they get bit, they get hissed at, they get barked at, they whatever from the furries at school. Okay? And so these kids did a protest and they walked out. And instead of actually investigating and finding out what the issue was and actually trying to address obviously the mental health situation that's taking place here, the administration goes on the defense and attacks the kids that gave the testimony and walked out. And in my book, I talk about how I know a couple of people that were actually in the room when they discussed on whether or not they put a litter box in the bathrooms in the school. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The quote that I use in my proposal is, I think of Coach Boone on Remember the Titans, when he says that you're not doing these kids a favor by patronizing them. You're crippling them. You're crippling them for life. And that's exactly what's happening. We are using a cruel kindness in the which that we believe we're doing some sort of benefit to these kids, but in all reality, we are hurting them. We are hurting them terribly. Particularly if we're willing to accept stuff like this, then we are just a hop, skip, and a jump away from allowing kids to pursue puberty blockers and things like that. And that's a massive, massive problem where we're going to have to face at one point or another. And this is where, we have examples of this sort of thing where people are completely blind to what's taking place. And I have a little clip here that kind of illustrates that.
Do you think a 12-year-old should be able to get a tattoo?
I'm going to say no.
Probably not.
No. It's probably too young to make decisions.
It's a pretty permanent decision.
They can't make the decision for themselves yet. Something permanent on their body.
Do you think a 12-year-old should be able to consent to puberty blockers?
Yes.
Yes.
And I understand how that sounds really hypocritical.
Yes, it's a permanent change on their body, but I think that at that point in their life, they probably know who they are, who they want to be.
And you think so at 12 years old?
Yes.
Do you think a 12-year-old should be able to consent to puberty blockers?
Yes, because that's not a permanent decision.
I think there's plenty of time to make those decisions later on once they've had a chance to decide exactly what they want their identity to be.
I think that maybe there should be more waiting, but I don't want to put down trans ideas.
If they could make an informed decision, yeah.
And you think a 12-year-old can make an informed decision?
I don't know, I guess it depends on the 12-year-old.
Be like a really mature 12-year-old.
Right, yeah.
Because some children you can just tell when that decision is legit with them.
So, I mean, when you listen to them talking, they obviously and immediately contradict themselves. They say that, hey, it's okay for a kid to, or they don't want a kid to get but by the way, if you do get a tattoo, you can actually have the tattoo removed later on. You take puberty blockers, they can never go